Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean, the Digital Events Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. We are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges by creating use of technology. Today, I'm very excited to welcome you to join the Cybersecurity for IT Manager with Marcus Harvey. So before I introduce Marcus, just letting you know, Connecting Up is a proud Digital Innovative Festival 2002 partner. And NFP Tech Series is the features event of the Digital Inclusion Features Program. This event is sponsored by the State Government of Victoria. And as part of the Digital Innovation Futures Initiative, DIV 2002 runs from 24th August to 7th September. And the DIV is delivered in collaboration with a network of partners, including Info Exchange, and is open to everyone to get involved. And today we are very honored to have Marcus Harvey with us. He's the Digital Transformation Manager. He leads Info Exchange Digital Transformation Program, aiming to help more than 10,000 organizations get better value from their technology investment, transforms operations, and achieve measurable outcomes with the clients and communities they work with. Before we begin, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. All lines are now muted. If you have any technical issues, please feel free to type in the questions box, and I'll be here to assist you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please also type into the questions box, and Marcus will be very happy to get them answered. And also, please note that your comments and questions will not be up here to the entire group. And now the webinar is being recorded. The link with the recording and the slides will be sent to you in 1 to 2 business days. And finally, I would like to remind you there's a very short survey at the end of the webinar. Please help us to complete that for even better experience in the future. All right, now I'll pass on to Marcus for today's section. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Really appreciate it, and so great to have so many people joining us today. I'm excited to talk about cybersecurity because I've been working with nonprofits for more than 2 decades, and one of the challenges in helping them with their digital infrastructure and technology is as you move more and more into the cloud, and as you enable staff to work more effectively from anywhere and reduce that load on your internal IT staff, making sure you're protecting your information becomes more critical. And so helping you to understand what's important, how to think about it, the resources that are available are really key to making sure that you get the best out of your technology environment. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We do pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to everyone on the call today. I'm joining you from Bunurong land in the Kulin Nation, and look, really acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and it's so pleasing to see some of those conversations progressing today, albeit it should have happened many, many years ago. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So what we want to talk through today, want to give you a very quick overview of the hub. I won't take more than a minute or 2 on that, just because it's a great source of information and detail for you. Give you a bit of an overview of the current cyber landscape, because unfortunately it changes all the time. Even changing of tech keeps people like me in a job. Changing of cyber, that's even faster than the transformation of tech. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information on what's happening there. Talk about cybersecurity practices that we think organizations should have in place. A bit of a highlight on entry points, because that's changed over recent years. 5 years ago, it was all about, encrypting data and locking that up through ransomware. Today, it's largely all about largely, I'll say it's not all about, the phishing emails being the #1 risk, and getting that in and then losing information, money, time, etc. as a result of that. So because that is the #1, we're going to talk about some real life phishing stories, key takeaways, and as always, we want to give you a bunch of useful resources so that you can actually make change within your own organization and get the most out of everything that we have to offer, while also saving yourself time, because we know that it's hard to be an expert in everything, and cyber is part of that challenge as well. So, Digital Transformation Hub, very quickly, online resource, digitaltransformation.org.au. You can see bottom left down there is the website. If you haven't, please check it out. We're going to talk about a few of the digital guides that we've got. There's a cyber readiness and overall digital technology readiness assessment that you can take. You can see where you are you back at basic, intermediate, or advanced in terms of your capability levels and your protection levels from an information security perspective. We've got case studies, we've got training resources, we've got cyber technology discounts for non-profits through the magnificent Connecting Up platform, as well as the ability to ask for expert advice when you need that unique advice. So all this is available on the front page of the website. You can drill in, off you go. I will highlight a few resources that we think are that more organisations should be making use of in a few minutes. One of the things that we use in the hub is to structure the technology jungle is the 5 domains, 5 non-profit digital domains: tech foundations, PCs, network infrastructure, collaboration tools, info systems. They're systems that support delivery of our services, client case management, CRM, membership management, finance, HR, etc. Your digital marketing space, website, email, social media, content production. That's all about attracting new funders and supporters. IT management, and what we're going to focus on today is cybersecurity, keeping your information safe with thorough cybersecurity, information management, device management processes, all about protecting staff, reputation, and client information. Now, cybersecurity actually covers all these domains, but we've broken it out in the hub in its own area, essentially so that you can browse cybersecurity resources as you wish, but also so you can do the cybersecurity assessment, see where you're at, make some improvements, and then 6 months down the track, do another assessment, which is again available through the hub, and see how you've improved. So really what we're wanting to do is give you that direct advice on how you're going. So let's talk a little bit about security in the headlines, because unfortunately, there are some challenges within the sector. We've got a couple of newspaper articles, which I'm just going to talk through, which really demonstrate that information security practices are no longer a nice to have. Given the increasing nature of our digital footprint and the growing threats, we have to build information security resilience into our organisations. It's really been in the headline most months in recent times, with a growing number of organisations across all sectors, whether it's health, whether it's defence, whether it's non-profit, or have been affected. Some of the headlines within the community services space from the last 18 months are on these next couple of slides. Oxfam had a donor information breach with over 500,000, over 1 million Australians. Details were disclosed via a data breach when a database was accessed through a security incident. In March, there was a caseworker who had worked at a community services organisation and had access to an IT system provided by Department of DHS, Health and Human Services. After leaving their position, their access actually wasn't revoked to the system. And he accessed confidential information after they had left the organisation, and then used that information to commit some children and unfortunately some sex offenders as well. And that's a really interesting one in that it wasn't so much a security breach. The issue with that one was that the person had left the organization, but their access hadn't been terminated when they left. So that just shows, and we'll talk more about this as we go today, it's not just about technology protections, it's about the processes and about the human sides, disabling access once someone leaves, making sure you've got those basic hygiene activities in place. Uniting Care Queensland had an attack on some of its IT systems and had to resort to manual workarounds when their systems were unavailable. And there was an incident with Uniting Communities in South Australia where staff were unable to access certain systems as a result of a cyber incident. And again, that would have required manual workarounds to work through that as well. Top left, it's not just about community services. My SA government IT with sort of systems where individual accounts were accessed via stolen password credentials. That was possible because people used the same password across online IT systems, and when one of those systems was compromised, the passwords obtained were the same password that were then got into the My SA Gov accounts, and that then provided access to details such as driver's license numbers, etc., which are a really key piece of identity information and enables that challenge of identity theft. Bottom left, Red Cross indicated that clients were potentially caught up in a cyber attack where a database of a parent org, the ICRC, was compromised with personal information. People who had sought services for loved ones being compromised. Earlier in the year, Russian-Ukraine tensions, warnings from the Australian government to adopt enhanced security postures. Unfortunately, those issues are still ongoing, and there's other tensions, particularly within the regions as well. And so just making sure that we keep that in front of mind, in that some of those bigger geopolitical issues are going to continue. Last one on the left, NDIS case management provider caught up in a data breach the other month, where personal information regarding customers who use the system and both carer and client information was compromised, including Medicare details and unfortunately tax file numbers. So some real challenges there as well. And impact of the incidents from cyber attacks vary. In some cases, data may become inaccessible due to being locked up by what's known as ransomware. In other cases, personal information is disclosed via a data breach. We've been involved, and I've been involved in helping nonprofits with the cleanup and investigations post. In pretty well every single incident, the organisation that we work with says, holy moly, it would have been a whole lot easier to put a couple of basic protections in place that would have addressed these issues and risks that allowed people to get in, rather than spend day, or usually days, sometimes weeks, investigating, analysing, confirming what was accessed, putting the breach report in, reporting back to the board on what happened, potentially informing clients and all staff about what happened depending on what the problem was, and managing that whole process. It's always easier to get those basic protections in place and make sure you've got that under control, because the cleanup, the investigation work that happens after the fact takes an awful lot longer afterwards. So the more you do beforehand, the whole lot better it is afterwards, because hopefully you won't even have that breach in the first place. All right, let's keep going. So what I want to just cover now really quickly, recent stats, about 500,000 scams, 2 billion in losses, 2021, according to the ACCC. And these numbers are increasing every year. Australian Cybersecurity Centre, the ACSC, which is a great resource. We'll link that at the end in the resources slide. Noted that there's, recently there was over 68,000 cybercrime reports. That's about one report every 8 minutes, just here in Australia. That to me just sort of shows the volume of, this is not attempts, this is actual reports. And so I'm really probably highlighting this particularly because this is happening all the time, and more we get those basic and fundamental protections in place, the better we'll do in terms of looking after our client and staff and other sensitive data. The key issue though is that the human element continues to drive breaches. From a recent global breach investigation report, Verizon data breach investigations this year, 82% of breaches involve the human element. Right? And so that's where you can have protections to reduce the potential or reduce the risk of a human element breach, but you have to address training, you have to support your staff, you have to make sure those processes are in place. Security behavior is greatly influenced by you and your perception of risk, and those perceptions really, you need to work with the management team and with staff within your organization to change that. So that said, let's talk a little bit about tech as well, because you really need both elements. Organizations really should have, in our view, protections across these following layers: IT network, your computing devices, your applications, and your data. In terms of the core principles, making sure that you've got protections against each of these areas is really important. Ranging from protections on cloud applications that you may use, such as Google Workspace, Microsoft 365 suite, through to using the internet safely on your IT network. These things are really important. You may have heard of the Essential 8, which is a set of technical mitigation strategies developed by the ACSC, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and is recommended for organisations to assess themselves and then implement those that are a priority for them. There's actually 3 levels within the ACSC Essential 8, and it's really important to work through that and think about what's right for you. We'll cover off some of those particular security points that are relevant for each of the layers in the coming slides. So we've got a poll, Jean, if you can help when appropriate. And the key question here is, do you provide documented guidance for staff on where to save information? Answers here: yes, we do provide document guidance for staff on where to save information. No, we do not, but they do the right thing, I'm not sure, no idea. So what I'm interested in is, do you explain to staff, well, if you're dealing with health data, you save it here. If you're dealing with public data, you can save it wherever you want. If you're storing credit card data, just to pick another sort of type of data set, you don't store it anywhere, or you store it in a very, very secure system along with your health data as well. So thanks, Jean. Looks like we've got the results. Beautiful. So no is a little bit higher than what I would like. 42% of a no, 45% of a yes, 12% not sure. A little bit of homework for the 12% to work out what the answer is. For me, it's really important. Thanks, Jean. You can close that whenever suits. For me, it's really important to think that through and make sure you do. The more sensitive data you provide, the more important it is, or the more that you hold, the more important it is to provide staff with documented guidance as to where it should be saved. Particularly if you're dealing with health data, you're dealing with sensitive client information, making sure that organisations or staff know where to save it is absolutely critical to making sure it stays safe. The second thing I'll mention though, because this is once you deal with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the slide set or the presentation. The second thing is also how pragmatic is it? How easy is it for staff to follow? Been working with one organisation recently. They provided staff with guidance, but it was pretty well almost impossible to follow. Particularly because often, at a high level, they said all health related information must be stored in your client and case management system there to be safe. It's protected by all these protections. The issue was that often they had to write letters to clients or reports that went to GPs, etc. And what happened was the caseworker wanted the team leader to review that report or that letter before it went. And they ended up saving it on their PC, emailing it to the team leader. Now that wasn't in accordance with, it's got to be saved in the client and case management system. And as we started to unpick that, we realized it was probably going to be too hard. There was still going to be a level of conformance getting those draft letters reviewed outside of the client and case management system. And so that's where we then started to work to introduce some additional checks and balances, where they save it within the file system, how they share it, encrypting it while it's saved to make sure it's under control, and also remote wipe. So it's not just about providing documentation on where it should be saved and teaching people, it's making sure it's practical, realistic, and supports people to work effectively. Or else, unfortunately, all too often IT can say it's all looked after and saved, but everyone does their own thing, and getting that balance right is really important. All right, moving on. So key things around that data protection element: where to store organizational data so it's backed up, how is it handled, so that if it's confidential, it's kept confidential. That comment I was making before about encryption, and the changes that we made for that particular client also ensured, offsite backup, etc. As well as how to handle physical documents with information, right? They're the key things that I suppose I want you to take away in this space. There's a useful framework developed by Telstra called the 5 No's of cybersecurity, with 5 data-centric questions. There'll be a link in the resources to that, which is a really good way of thinking about and framing the questions on your data protections to make sure that it's appropriate. But thinking that through and coming back to that human element, not just have you provided staff with guidance, but also how pragmatic and practical is it, and how do you get that right balance is really important. All right. Next question, ask the audience. Is multi-factor authentication enabled for all internet-facing systems with sensitive data? So that's the question I just want Jean to share with you and get your input on. Yes, we have multi-factor or two-factor, don't care how many factors there are, for all internet-facing systems with sensitive data. I'm not defining sensitive. You can make that determination yourself. It's different for every organization. If you're not sure, use some common sense. Not always in the cybersecurity or IT space, unfortunately, common sense, but we always like a bit of that. No or not sure. And Jean, if you can share the results when you've got a minute.
No worries. All right, it's on the screen.
Fantastic. So they're pretty good numbers, I've got to say. Multi-factor authentication is really important from our perspective. And I'll share a story later on where essentially there was a phishing breach, but multi-factor authentication stopped the intruder getting into that core sensitive system. So our big advice is, if you haven't got it, go do it straight away. The first priority, if you store sensitive data, and most organizations do, in your cloud collaboration platform, either the Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, or something else similar, go do it there first. If you've got other internet-facing systems such as cloud case management, etc., then also tackle those as well. So that's really important from our perspective, in terms of making sure that is protected, because the great thing about the cloud is you can access your information anywhere. The bad thing about the cloud is so can people that are trying to get access to that information. All right, next one. How many different systems are used across your organization? Jean, another poll, thank you. 3 or less, 4 to 8, 9 to 12, more than 13. Sorry, that should say 13 or more than 12. No idea. People and teams just start using new systems anytime they like, and we can't keep track of it. Unfortunately, that does happen more often than I would like. So if you can give us your response to that one, because this actually, what I'm wanting to do with this one is expose a bit of a problem or a conundrum. So let's have a look at the results when you can, Jean.
No worries. We got a questions from Melissa regarding to
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Thank you. So she's talking about, I wonder how this would work practically for volunteer organizations for the multi-factor authentication.
So there are a couple of ways of tackling volunteers. Our recommended approach is you still give volunteers individual accounts. Right? That can be done both with the, and I'll come to the results on the screen in a second. That can be done both with the Microsoft platform, with the Google platform at no cost. There's no cost options available. So that is our recommended approach. So give them individual accounts, multi-factor them to their phones, and that should keep them safe. We do have a number, there are a number of organizations that I've worked with where, for whatever reason, volunteers have to, it's too hard for volunteers not to share accounts, is the decision the organization has made. That's probably the best thing I can say. In those situations, what we've often suggested, or what's been implemented, is then you lock the volunteers down so they can only log in if you're doing that sort of sharing account situation, which I'd rather you move to individual accounts, as I talked earlier. What you do is you lock the accounts down so they can only log in from the office, and that dramatically reduces that risk. And then when volunteers are in the office, they can log in, but no one outside of the office, or the office IP address, to be more specifically technically correct, can log in. And that dramatically reduces that risk to a more acceptable level if you can't go with option one, which is how do you actually control in providing individual accounts for volunteers. So hopefully that answers it, but if not, let us know if you need more info on that one. All right, how many different systems are used across your organization? Nice to see most in the 4 to 8 space with 67%, 2/3. Lucky one in, I don't know what my maths is like, 1 in 9 being 3 or less, 9 to 12, 18%, and no idea. That's unfortunately, I've had quite a few organizations with that no idea challenge. My comment here is the important thing, the more you use, the more important it is, or the more there are available, the more important it is to support staff with a password manager, a secure way of storing their passwords. Recommendations today are, number one, use unique passwords for each different system. Number two, don't change your passwords, or don't force password change. Secure them via multi-factor authentication, protected by a second sort of factor phone, whatever. So If you're in the 4 to 8, now I'm not the sharpest tack in the hardware cabinet, but I struggle to remember 4 complex passwords, I'll admit, right? I can probably do 3 without too much trouble. I can get to 4 if I have to using passphrases, but 5, 6, 7, it's just no way. It's just getting a bit too difficult for me. So the more systems that are available for your staff, and this comes back to the pragmatic side as well, the more important it is to give them a way of being able to store those passwords effectively. So I just wanted to tie that back to be pragmatic with what you're doing with your organization. Don't go, yep, we've forced everyone to have complex passwords. We've made sure that, it's really hard to get in and all that sort of stuff. We've got, you've got to use 38 separate characters of numbers, letters, and all the rest of it. No one's going to remember that. They're either going to write on a bloody post-it note or just use the same password everywhere or both. So it's about thinking about how can you make it easy. So, we inside our organization, we use a password manager. For me, that generates my complex passwords automatically with horrible characters and all that sort of stuff. And making sure you think that through about how many have you got, what's reasonable for your staff to be able to create those complex passwords, as well as not sharing them across systems is really important. All right. Jumping in a bit more detail. So user length and composition of passwords and passphrases is really important. We've talked about multi-factor authentication. Do not reuse passwords across user accounts because that's a very easy way of supporting compromise. For a bit of fun, I looked up on the Have You Been Pawned site. There'll be a link at the end. For my personal email address, my work email address is pretty good. My personal email address, because I've used Facebook, the lovely thing that it is, I've used a whole lot of different things. It's like, holy moly, because there's so many breaches in so many of those personal systems, it's like they've had my personal email and password has been involved in breaches in a number of those systems. So if I had reused passwords across those systems, that would have been an entry point to get people in. And I'll often show that if I'm doing a staff security presentation to help staff realize that this is why we say do not reuse passwords, because of that risk of if one system gets breached, they can just jump across and get access to another system. Change your password if it's been compromised, and don't share passwords with other staff. As I mentioned before, sometimes there is a real business need that's very difficult to get around sharing passwords, such as that volunteers, if you've got volunteers sharing an account. If that cannot be avoided, then please use a password manager. Please use a way of sharing it securely, as well as making sure there is an approach around what happens when a volunteer or when someone leaves the organization who knows that password. All right, hopefully that answered those questions and covered a few things as well. Another question, do you provide staff with guidance on whether they can work using their own devices, e.g., thanks Jean, access information? So you access organizational information. Do you provide staff with guidance? No, we value flexibility and trust our staff to always do the right thing. Yes, they can use their own devices. Yes, they must use our PC on their own mobile phone. Yes, they must use both ours, PC and mobile phone, or don't know. Which one best fits what you do today? That's the question.
Lovely. While we are waiting for the votes, we got the same questions from two audience, Daniel.
Beautiful.
So do you have a recommended password manager, Marcus?
So short answer is there are many good password managers out there. The Connecting Up site has been able to bring Dashlane to the non-profit party. That's probably the right way of putting it. So there's a special discount on Dashlane, and it's a really great password manager that you absolutely should check out and try simply because of price point. The other options that I've seen nonprofits use and be happy with are LastPass and 1Pass or 1Password. I've forgotten the second part of that. So they're the three that I've seen nonprofits being happy with, but would lead you towards Dashlane only because of price point. So hopefully that suits.
No worries at all. In the meantime, I also put it on the chat box for these 3 password manager and with the link as well. So feel free to explore for the password manager at Connecting Up website.
Beautiful. How are the numbers going, Jean?
Yes, please let me share the result. Here you go.
All right. So this is a no value, flexibility, and trust, or haven't got around to it, to be perfectly honest, is the other option. Yes, they can use their own devices. So really nice split across there. So my comment is this, and there's no right or wrong, okay? So I will say the majority of organizations we work with are either in the we value flexibility and trust. Actually, we top 3 I would say the majority of organizations I've worked with. It's either I haven't got around to it, haven't defined it, it's all too hard, or they can use their own devices, but we haven't really thought through the security implications of that, or they've got to use our PC, but they can use their own mobile phone. The more sensitive your data, the more important it is to think this through. If you provide, I'm going to just pick an organization I'm working with at the moment in the provide counseling services to women who have unfortunately experienced sexual violence. They deal with highly sensitive data, right? That's very different to an organization that does a community engagement work to build communities and have shared and open groups when they almost share anything openly because there's very little private stuff and they're very inclusive. But the more sensitive data you use and you have, the more important it is to think about, okay, so if it's going on a PC or a phone and that phone gets lost, how is it going to be protected? So, Jean, we might jump back to the slides and making sure that we've got those protections in place. So the sort of things that are important in terms of what you need to think about, obviously physically protecting devices, locking screen when device is unattended, don't install or use unauthorized software. We do find with home devices that there are sometimes challenges if kids use it as well. They're not always so, shall we say, disciplined about not installing a fantastic new freeware game, which comes with added extras, and keeping devices up to date. They're the challenges with BYOD home devices, particularly PCs. Phones are not as big a risk, but there's still issues in there. We like to suggest that if you are enabling, supporting, bring your own devices, think about PIN, password code, fingerprint, Face ID protected. Don't store personal information about clients on there. Keep devices updated and have antivirus software installed, particularly for Windows-based devices, and enable remote wipe capability and or encryption if appropriate, if lost or stolen. So the issue there is if you're enabling, if you're supporting the BYOD, an info exchange does, to be honest. This is a personal mobile phone that I use. But there's expectations and requirements there around what I can versus what I can't store, and also about protections and remote wipe, etc. Organizations that do support that sometimes will often need to think about, do I go down the mobile device management route that then enforces encryption, remote wipe on PCs, or secure containers on those devices to ensure that the data is effectively protected. Those sorts of things are more costly and more complex to implement, I will say that, right? Not necessarily from a licensing perspective, sometimes, but not always, but more from a labor and a management perspective. And so just making sure that, that balance is right is really important for you, because otherwise it starts to get a little bit too unrealistic and doesn't maintain. The other thing as well, obviously, network security, making sure you've got those fundamentals under control, VPNs for remote access into internal secure systems. You're not sort of got insecure wireless protocols, etc. Most of the cloud collaboration platforms, both Google Workspace and 365, offer good email filtering today and phishing protection, but often you'll need to tune that a little bit as well. All right. Moving on, security incident reporting. I hate to say it, but everyone will have to deal with a security incident at some stage, is my expectation, is my experience. Because things move and change, staff don't always do the right thing, neither do IT managers, or not, at least neither do, I try to do the right thing always, but I don't always get it right. And so these things happen, right? It's really important for staff to have a contact point to report a potential security incident so it can be analysed, because staff don't always know, was it a real problem, was it a potential one? And encouraging them and making them feel that this is a positive to report, not something that they will be blamed about. Anything such as unfamiliar activity, disclosure, lost device, or there's another called a person on the office premise, lost physical access cards. These things are really important to encourage staff, make sure they've got that clear contact point. I'll cover really quickly email, internet, social media use. Staff really need to be aware of their obligations and the points listed on the email. There's a really useful, and a link again will be in the, in the resources, sorry, thinking about cybersecurity rather than the last slide for a minute. In the resources slide, on the hub, there you go, just bringing that into view. There's a do-it-yourself end-user security policy, which our friends at PricewaterhouseCoopers, far more eminent organisation than with people that are more skilled in cyber than I am, and they've developed this end-user security policy, right? So this is designed for us, non-profit IT staff or managers, to read and edit and go, I've now got something, right, that says what we allow and what we don't allow. So you can see here we're starting to talk about password security. And you can see there's stuff in blue, edit the section in accordance with what you need. Expecting staff to select a lengthy password, keep password secure, do not reuse, do not attempt to use any account other than your own, do not share it with others, change your password at first login, comply with password policies, and there's some suggestions there. And off we go. Must store organization data in appropriate locations, either can use, can't use, removable media, whatever is appropriate. So we've tried to develop this so that it's easy for you to give your staff guidance on what you expect from a good practice perspective. That was our aim. So I encourage you, link will be at the end, have a look at this. Look, if you don't have an acceptable use policy, please take a little bit of time, get it developed, get it and so that your staff, you can think through. The hard bit is actually not getting the policy right. It's thinking through, do we allow BYO, don't we allow bring your own device? What's right for us? How complex do we need things to be? What are our expectations on staff? To be honest, it's that thinking about what do we want to expect takes a little bit longer than the actual, all right, let's just delete, add, put 3 words in there. All right, mentioned earlier, phishing, looking at time, I'm going to speed up. Phishing is the top entry point that we see these days. Ransomware and business email compromise is up there as well. Ransomware is dropping compared to earlier in the year. Couple of real life phishing stories. This is one. Staff member received this email about a message that couldn't be delivered. They clicked on the review button, presented with what looked like a standard SharePoint login page. Username was pre-filled. Oh, must be trusted, must know. Clicked on password, clicked on login. What do you know? All of a sudden, username password's been picked up by a third party. Thankfully, multi-factor was deployed, and so when the third party tried to attempt, that access was blocked. Staff reported it, asked to change, a little bit of education around, oh, what do you know? That's an interesting email address there. As well as if you hover over the link, it looks a little bit weird and interesting as well. So using them as a teaching example, I'm going to skip these, is really important. We quite like this page as a very useful poster to teach staff how to catch phishing emails that get through the tech systems, if you like. Being the from addresses, the reply to address, grammar and spelling, generic greetings, attachments that you're not expecting, something urgent, and strange links. They're the 7 things that if staff understand how to go through, and none of them are overly complex, and do it regularly, it's really important and can really stop those phishing emails in their tracks. I'm going to skip that question because we're running out of time, but I will mention the ACSC quiz in terms of is a really good one to share with staff because it gives them a couple of really sensible examples. They can use the hover over, they can look at the from address, and they can go, yes, that one's a phishing email, no, that one's not, and they'll get told, did they get it right, wrong, why? So this is a really nice little quiz, which together with the previous page on this is how you spot it, really builds that human element up and makes sure that you have those protections in place. I will make the comment because this has happened more than once with organizations that have come to us for assistance. Just tech solutions and staff training on phishing is not enough. So for large amounts of spend, make sure double signatures are required. This is one of my favorites. I've had 2 organizations come to us in the past 12 months that have been caught by this. Change of bank account details via alternate channels need to be verified via an alternate channel. So for instance, if the payroll team just gets an email saying, theoretically from Marcus or from a supplier saying, bank account details have changed, please use this BSB and account number in the future, don't just email back to that email address, use a phone call to a separate phone number on record or via the website, not the phone number in the email, because we've seen, as I just explained, 2 instances in the last 12 months of organizations that have contacted us about this, where email had been compromised. No, by the way, in both those, no, multi-factor wasn't sorted. And then they use that to do that. All right, let's do bank account change, bang, off they go, right? And if they had have just taken that approach of saying, I'm going to pick up the phone and call someone, that's the easiest way of sorting that one out. HR elements, making sure that, as I was saying earlier, you take a grateful approach to reports of lost or potentially stolen devices. That's really important. You want that encouraged. And security awareness, refresher training. To be honest, we've been saying that for a while. We got told everyone's too busy in the non-profit land. So we are now running regular security awareness training. So if you go to the Connecting Up website, and actually I think it's the next slide or the slide after in the resources, you can just as part of the new starter process, you can send staff to the Connecting Up website, attend zero cost. It's run for free every month. Security Awareness 101 for non-profit staff to teach them a lot of those basics. And if they start and it's more urgent, they can also go back and watch a previous recording. So we're trying to help the sector with some of those little tips and tricks as well. Key takeaways: multi-factor authentication. I'm going to run through this because you'll get the slides separately. User education, Essential 8 is really important. I haven't covered that in detail, but there is a link on the next slide. And make cybersecurity risk management and governance a priority. So have conversations about prioritizing cybersecurity within your organization. Engage your executive, engage your managers so they engage staff. That's really important because there is that human element. Here you go, useful resources, Hub Cyber Resources up here. This is the link to the cyber webinars for non-profit staff, and you will find today's webinar in that list as well. We're doing another great one actually with PwC. It's a panel with some non-profit corporate services, non-cyber experts as well, just talking about what do we do, what have we seen in the non-profit sector. So that's mid next month, late next month from memory. So sign up for that. I'm really looking forward to that one. Security policy template, privacy guidelines, the Telstra 5 no's of cyber, which is a really nice framing, the ACSC report, as well as what I was talking about earlier. Check your personal or organizational email address to see if it's been compromised by a data breach. They also have good information around what was it. Was it just your name? Was it your title? Was it your name, your title, your email address, your phone number, your driver's license, etc. And another great organisation, ID Care, that do really good work. Again, another non-profit like us that help with identity theft. Oof. I'm going to jump for questions and discussion.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Marcus. It's very informative. All right, so feel free to type in any questions and we can answer it right now. So there's a question for myself. Are we getting the materials later? Yes, you'll be getting all the recordings and materials of the presentation slides in 1 to 2 business days, so that you can always refresh and you can always share to your colleagues as well. And we actually got some comments before about the password manager. So we got an audience twin. So he said he actually used KeePass, K-E-E. So that's the password manager, and it's available across the platform so that I can access it by using my phone when I'm on a PC.
Yep, no, it's another good one, which I didn't mention. We used to use KeePass and moved to one of the others, so for a few different reasons, but KeePass is, you can set it up to be absolutely secure, and it is a good solution from a security perspective, absolutely.
100%, thank you. And thanks for the comments. We got a questions asking, so what do we do if someone clicks on a suspect link in an email?
Great question. So first question I always ask is, have you just clicked on the link or have you actually put in your username and password? They're not, I don't always, how do I put it, rely on what they answer, because I think often people are willing to give up some, but not everything, because they don't want to look too silly. But usually if they've clicked on a link, it's often a phishing email to direct a person to a page. We generally suggest change the password immediately, whether or not they've put in username password details. Again, better to be safe rather than sorry. Clearly there's an email address that's got out. If they did put if that did direct them to a web page, it's also important to consider whether malware may have been installed on the machine, depending on the protections and if they've got admin rights or even if they don't have admin rights to the machine. In that case, we'll often suggest that often a malware scan should be done as well, and making sure that you've also got up-to-date antivirus and anti-malware software is critical. So that's generally what we suggest.
That's great. Thank you for the tips. So I believe this is a very critical question for most of us. So thank you for that. And we got a comments from Danielle. Outstanding content. Thank you so much, Marcus and team. Thank you for
Thanks,
the kind
Danielle.
words. And we got a questions related to LastPass. So is an app like LastPass safe to use to store passwords? So I'll let Marcus to maybe elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, we love LastPass. We've got plenty of organizations that I know that use it. You can secure it with multi-factor authentication. That's one of the key things I will always want in some sort of password manager. You can share passwords across users. So, for instance, if for whatever reason Jean and I need to share a password to my PowerPoint presentation pack, I can share it through LastPass with Jean, and then we both have access to that password. So, from that perspective, yeah, absolutely, LastPass is safe to use. And just configure it appropriately, like any package.
Yes, 100%. Because like my personal experience using LastPass in connecting up, and I use Dashlane as well in my personal things. So I think these two are really good to go. If you're interested in Dashlane, feel free to click on the link on the chat box, and I can also put the link in the follow-up email. And we got a questions from Elton. Do you have any thoughts around adding a layer of MFA around all the Windows apps which don't themselves support MFA?
Look, my take on that is security is a long road, and you have to decide where your biggest risks are and what you prioritize. So my answer is, if there's a checkbox that you can tick and MFA is then enabled on every Windows app, and staff can use that easily and it doesn't disturb their ability to deliver services and work effectively, check that checkbox, off you go. In my experience, it's not that simple, and there's a fair bit of work to get those sorts of changes working. And that's where the question then becomes, are you better off investing your constrained time and effort in that activity, or are you better investing it in a phishing test to check how well your staff can spot a phishing email? Are you better to do an intrusion test to identify potential weak spots in your defenses? Or are you better to make sure your patching processes are up to date and your devices are appropriately patched with critical patches, just to name a few things? And I could list another 30 technical things, as well as when someone leaves, have we got the processes in place to actually disable their accounts per the problem at the start? So for me, it's always about, there's never enough time to put everything in place that you want to from a security perspective. It's always about what offers the next biggest bang for buck for your environment and your staff. So as I said, if it's a tick box, bang, off you go, absolutely do it. Usually it's more effort than that, and then you've got to balance it around what are the other things you could be doing and where that bang for buck exists. Hopefully that helps with that question.
Yes, totally. Thank you. All right, I believe we got one last questions here from Joanne. So is Microsoft Security Essentials enough to use for scans?
Good question. So my answer to that is the 365 platform inherently now has pretty good antivirus, as part of that, protections and security essentials I would put within that. The problem I have with security essentials is it relies on staff to notify you of a problem out of the box. So there's no central monitoring or reporting out of the box that someone can keep an eye on or get an alert on. So the issue I have with security essentials by itself fundamentally is, and by the way, we would, there is, again, it's that balance of risk versus reward. In my opinion, I'll put it this way, it is good enough. For the clients we look after, we don't rely on it. We actually use other things, but it's good enough. It's about dollars versus reward. The main problem I have with security essentials is that there's no central monitoring or reporting. So that's the main problem. You can set that up via Intune if you've got business premium licenses, but there is a bit of work to do that. So that's my answer on security essentials. I'm sure that if someone will probably have a different view, I will say this, I completely get those that don't like security essentials and think that you need to spend more. I'm not arguing with you on that one. For me, it's a business decision and it's a risk versus reward thing. But whereas I say in black and white, you must turn on MFA for your, for your 365 environment. It's not there's no risk reward thing. It's a you must. Whereas for security essentials, it can work, but you need to think about what do you do, because half the staff may well just ignore the fact that the security essentials has found a virus and has not cleaned it. And that's the issue I have, or concern I have, and just thinking that through is important.
Wonderful, thank you. And in the meantime, we got a comment from Elton. So he's referring this. I think the Microsoft Defender for 365 has notification capability and has NFP pricing too. So this could be the plan too. What do you think?
It absolutely does. I'm just making that comment that there is additional work for that central reporting management. So, and that's a slightly different product to the security essentials. So everything that he said is absolutely true. It's not as turnkey out of the box as some of the other elements, is the bit that I'll say frustrates me. I would love it to be a whole lot easier for it to be deployed and centrally managed in the 365 environment. But it's changing all the time. Hopefully that's one of the things on their roadmaps, along with a million other things they're doing.
Yes, totally. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, making this section so interactive. And we got so many questions during the webinars as well. I guess that's pretty much for the Q&A today. I guess we are having some exciting webinars coming up, aren't we?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, if security is your thing, please check out, actually, I might even go to it. Please check out the cybersecurity page in terms of what's available through the Connecting Up site, because it's really nice to be able to see, just fix that. We've got 2 coming up. PC's obviously running a bit slow today with all the webinar producing. So we've got, this is the cybersecurity page, which is in the information security page. So you can see here both, here's today's ones, here's the ones for staff to keep information secure. There's the CyberCon, which was a great webinar recorded back in June, where you can have a look at that, as well as this is the non-profit, what will it take to create a cyber safe futures panel discussion with a whole range of great people as well. So you can look through that and have a look and find what's right for you and what you can do in terms of browsing old ones and new ones. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you so much, Marcus. So I'll also put this link onto the follow-up emails. So if you're interested, feel free to register. And then like 90% of the cybersecurity webinars are free of charge. So it's really a good tools and a good platform for you to understand more about cybersecurity. That's the hottest topic in the world now. All right, thank you again, Marcus. It's our honor to have you today.
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please use the hub. If you haven't yet, check out DIF 2022. There's even more cybersecurity, fabulous live events and recorded events on the DIF website. They've got hundreds of great, innovative digital use throughout the festival that's going on for 2 weeks. So it's a great resource.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And thank you, all of you. We'll see you soon next time. Goodbye.